Hello, everyone, and welcome to my weekly vlog. While there's an amount of uncertainty that comes with this pandemic, one thing I know for sure is the strength of our people and teams and how they are prepared to care for our patients and each other. One of those teams helping to support the COVID-19 efforts and those in the front lines is our provincial eSIM team. They develop and facilitate exercises that allow participants to practice their skills in a simulated, realistic environment. Their focus is on building team effectiveness, identifying new processes and improvements, and proactively mitigating safety hazards. Learning through simulation has many advantages, including access to unique, customizable experiences and the freedom to make and learn from mistakes without the risk of causing harm. And many teams have taken advantage of simulation during the pandemic. In fact, the eSIM team has been coordinating and training hundreds of clinical and non-clinical teams across the province on the COVID-19 response since early March. This includes critical care areas such as emergency departments, ICUs, operating rooms, labor and delivery teams, and many more from each zone of the province. Joining me to tell us more about eSIM and their work during the pandemic are Dr. Vince Grant, who's the medical director of eSIM, Marette Dubé, a simulation consultant in Calgary, and Monica Johnson, a simulation consultant in Grand Prairie. So thank you for joining me today and welcome to all of you. We're going to start with you, Vince. I gave a very brief overview about your team in my opening remarks, but can you expand on that and tell us a bit more about what eSIM is really all about?
Simulation is a really powerful teaching tool as well as a really powerful evaluation tool. And we can use both of those to look at, as you said, creating kind of realistic clinical scenarios and situations where both individuals and teams can rehearse in a safe environment where there is really no harm being done to a patient. And these could be everything from clinical procedures and surgeries. It could be tabletop exercises and environmental scans. It could be atypical presentations of really common things we see all the time and just honing our skills. Or it could be really rare events that are, high acuity, low opportunity that are really important for our teams to be able to handle. They could be new procedures and approaches, and I think we'll talk a bit today about the approach with COVID-19. And as you kind of alluded to a little bit, we're looking for those latent safety threats and all kinds of things that we can see in the environment that we can even fix ahead of time to allow our systems and our care spaces, to be more supportive to our frontline teams. In 2019, we had almost 3,100 sessions across the province, and that involved just under 30,000 participants. And so it's a very active program in all 5 zones with 21 dedicated simulation and technical consultants, and a really robust faculty development program, as well as a mentorship program to bring on many independent educators who can use simulation in their toolbox so that in this way we can really amplify our work to hundreds of those educators across the province.
I know that fostering a just culture is a very big part of eSIM's goals. So how do you actually work just culture into the simulations, and why is it so important?
What I really love about simulation, Verna, is that it really fits into all of those things in AHS that we hold dear and find important. And so I'm so glad that you asked a question about just culture. A big part of what we do in simulation, and probably the most important part of it, to be honest, is kind of the post-scenario reflection, or what we call a debriefing, where we use our skilled facilitators to help teams to kind of talk about what happened and maybe come up with different thoughts or ways of doing things. And for those that are concerned, they can bring up concerns and they can share them, and we hope a very open, honest, and safe environment. So we try to create an environment for that debriefing where everyone feels safe, they're encouraged to reflect and share their ideas, and they're openly asked to discuss quality and safety issues up front. And so in that way, I think simulation has a very important link to patient safety and some of the work that's going on. As I mentioned before, it's an evaluation tool, so we can evaluate these latent safety threats in those clinical environments. We can also, partner with our colleagues and, on patient safety committees, review RLS reports, and we can use those themes to actually broadcast those important themes we're seeing across the organization through our education to frontline care providers. And I guess finally, simulation itself is really strong for teaching those communication skills that allow any frontline provider to speak up and help us to prevent errors from happening in the first place.
So moving over to you, Monica, I know that the eSIM team has been very busy fielding requests for training from across the province. So can you give us an example of a clinical team you worked with and how you helped them with their COVID response?
So thanks, Verna. We've been very fortunate to work with many teams throughout the COVID response. And one team in particular that we were able to assist with COVID preparedness, we were able to look at their space, do a walkthrough needs assessment for them, and be able to provide some guidance as to where to best receive their COVID patients into the hospital. We've been very far-reaching with regards to all the teams we've been able to work with. And so once we were able to also walk them through exercises in COVID-protected intubation, we felt like we left that team with numerous resources and preparedness as they were waiting to receive COVID patients coming into the site. We also were able to hear back from that team when they did receive a patient into the site and how smoothly things had gone for them and how effective walking through relieving some of the anxieties and fears around receiving COVID patients into their workplace was able to best prepare them.
Marette, same question to you. Can you give me a non-clinical example of a group that your team worked with?
During the initial response, I was fortunate enough to be in the role of the eSIM COVID response team lead. And within that role, we were triaging and supporting hundreds of requests, as you mentioned, coming in across the province for SIM. So, as has been alluded to already, these were around preparing teams and preparing the system and processes to help them. So what really stands out is, SIM is such an excellent tool to bring all of the clinical and non-clinical team members together to really work through these processes. So I would say one common example, let's say, would be in our emerge department, where we would involve the unit clerk with the triaging piece with the suspected COVID, the protection services officers to ensure safe transport of the patient back to the COVID room. Then we'd have all of the clinical and non-clinical team members there practicing their donning, their intubation, and their doffing safely with PPE. And what was so key is we had like infection prevention and control at all of those simulations to help answer questions, and our educators and leaders. So just having everybody together like that was huge in us really building our efficiencies and our safety and just working through it together and learning from each other how it impacted everyone. So it's sort of one of those things where it brought everyone together. It was great.
Vince, what kind of feedback has eSIM received from teams that they've worked with? And have you heard about how they are applying what they've learned?
All of the feedback that we have received, both I'll talk about kind of locally in Alberta and even beyond our borders, has been tremendous right from the start. And I can just say our team has been really proud to be involved in this kind of preparedness response. As Marette was talking about, like right off the bat, there were so many requests, and our team really helped kind of rise to the challenge. To echo what they were saying, I think there was so much fear and anxiety in those early days that I think, we were able to just really help to just make that feel a little less daunting, a little less anxiety provoking, and a little less fearful as teams were, entering the clinical environment. And I think that indirect feedback we got directly from our care providers, I think continues to be very positive and very, very strong. We also were able to meet a lot of new clinical areas or units or even communities that weren't really using simulation before. We have lots that, I think you mentioned a few of them at the start, that there are kind of common users, as you would expect, but there were lots of different groups that, were connected with us, and we could help them with, whatever they were worried about, whether it was a process, a procedure, a new environment, a change to their environment. And so with those groups moving forward, we're going to be able to continue to kind of work with them. And I think we've been able to innovate. And so part of that feedback has been kind of innovation. So I know we'll talk about it a little bit later, but Monica was part of a group that really looked at some groundbreaking work and virtually facilitating simulations remotely. And there's not been a lot of work done in that before. So I think that's been really exciting. I think, as I mentioned, beyond our borders, I think we were able to also use our tremendous kind of AHS experience to help others in other jurisdictions with their COVID responses as well. We presented on some national webinars through Simulation Canada. We actually published just recently an article on our COVID preparedness that was led by Moret. And that shows up in the Advances in Simulation, which is an open access journal. I invite anyone to go and take a look. And it really summarized, what we saw, what we found, and how we set it up. And this allowed other groups around the world really to kind of learn from our cumulative experience, being kind of one of the largest healthcare organizations in the world. And then we do have another one coming out in the near future on the virtually facilitated simulation as an innovation. So it's great because we're starting to get that feedback even outside our borders of how much we are making a difference, helping everyone to kind of be prepared and deal with COVID-19. So I think this is a really exciting time for eSIM going forward, and really the growth of simulation-based training across the province as we kind of continue to support the education and those safety needs of frontline learners across the province.
Moret, I know that you've described some initial challenges in the early days of the COVID response, but maybe moving beyond that, what has been some other challenges facilitating eSIM sessions during this pandemic?
Verna, I think the biggest challenge, which, is a good one to manage, to be honest with you, and it really spoke to how many people came together and wanted to prepare together. It was just the sheer volume of the demand of, the demands of requests that we had. So in the first 6 weeks, we trained over 40,000 healthcare workers across Alberta in 6 weeks. And I'm going back to what Vince had said, that's really more than we had normally done within a year. So it just speaks to kind of the demand that we had, but it was a great demand, and we were grateful to have the opportunity to support so much training. And those requests really, as mentioned, fielded in from a lot of critical care initially, like emergencies and ICUs, neonatal ICUs, and then quickly continued on through areas such as diagnostic imaging and medical floors and clinics and so on. So it's just a fantastic way to support everyone. So yeah.
Monica, Vince had talked about some of the innovations that you did around reaching rural and remote communities. So maybe describe some of what you did with that.
One approach I'm happy to share with you that we've incorporated into our provincial program in serving rural and remote communities is virtually facilitated simulation. As you know, the entire province spans over 650,000 square kilometers. While the majority of our population resides in urban centers, we've always battled how do we offer a consistent simulation education approach to these distant sites. Virtually facilitated simulation has allowed us to quickly expand and share learnings from our urban counterparts across multiple geographically isolated hospitals in the province in an effective manner with very short timelines, which have also yielded high impact. Via technology, specifically Zoom, we are able to bring multiple content experts to the rural and remote sites to support their preparedness and meet their education needs. One example I can share is one day we were doing a virtual simulation in Wabasca, and we pivoted it in the following 30 minutes, offered a simulation in Jasper, which is 6.5 hours away. We wouldn't have been able to accomplish that in one day, let alone probably multiple days. So the virtually facilitated simulation has helped increase access to continuing medical education across the province.
Just to finish off and say thank you to all of you for coming on today and sharing this great information. The work that you do is not only fascinating, but so critical to us as a learning healthcare organization. It illustrates the importance of teamwork, which really extends across all of our teams, programs, and departments. And it's really thanks to that teamwork that has enabled us to maintain our incredible ongoing COVID response. Our ability to integrate and work together is a trademark of AHS, and I want to thank you for the work that you do that makes teamwork so successful. And again, being leaders nationally and internationally, really makes us really proud of all that you've done over the past 10 years to really get us to where we are today. So thanks again to the three of you. Thanks to all of you for watching and learning, and I'll see you again next week.
Together, we do amazing things every day.